George Washington, I'm sure during his lifetime had many opponents, but I don't think any one of them called him an immoral person because he was a slave owner. I don't think he ever imagined that one day his monuments will be demolished because he had slaves. But those who want to take these monuments down seem to be right. Slavery is a terrible thing. In those times, slavery was the norm, say his defenders. According to the ethics of that age, he wasn't doing anything wrong. And they seem to be right as well. But I'm confused. To own a person as your property and to lynch him, sometimes to death, is it considered wrong only for today's era, or is it immoral for all generations? I hope you will agree that it is immoral for all generations. But if that's the case, then George Washington should have been considered a bad person even in the 18th century by their standards. And that means that his monuments must be demolished even according to them. Each era and each society defines its own ethical standards, you might say. You cannot condemn past generations from today's perspective. Okay, this means that the concepts of universal and eternal moral values don't exist. No principles can ever claim to be everlasting and absolute, and history should not have any moral judgments about the past. Each society defines its own morality. Genghis Khan and Torquemada and Hitler, by the standards of their society, weren't doing anything wrong. If you are for destroying the monuments to George Washington, I have a question for you. Today's moral values differ from the values of the past. Why do you think that your values are correct? Why are your ethics absolute and theirs are not? And if you want to leave those monuments in place, because each generation has its own views on morality, then I have a different question for you. Why do you think that you can ever condemn anyone from the past generations? Or for that matter, from the other cultures of today? Hitler cannot be considered evil. Their society had their own ideas about what's right and what's wrong. The question of monuments to slave owners points to the inherent contradiction that lies at the foundation of the modern Western worldview. On the one hand, they consider their values eternal, and on the other hand, they change them as they wish, whenever they wish. Yesterday, my eternal values were this, and today my eternal values are that. There were times when people did not even think that there can be anything wrong with slavery. Slave owners were considered moral people. So why do you think that your kids won't be spitting on your graves for you doing something today that you consider completely harmless? Or that humanity will not decide in a generation or two, as they once believed that murdering innocent people is okay. I am an observant Jew. My religion is often frowned upon for not evolving or modernizing. I am accused of living by the laws which are thousands of years old. Guilty as charged. You may disagree with my principles, but I know that my culture will not change them with every time the wind is blowing from a different direction. Those who were considered great people by the Torah observant community 1,000 years ago are still considered to be great by the Torah observant community today. What was considered good in ancient Judea is considered good by me. The modern world turns its basic values upside down so often that people have hard time imagining that a society can keep its principles unchanged for thousands of years. Therefore, those who are not very familiar with the Torah think that it also changes. They point at phrases in the Torah that seem to be unacceptable today, but they do that only because they never studied their real meaning. We've had a number of videos on these topics, and in particular, we had a video about the Torah on slavery. Check it out if you want. People who follow the Torah live today according to the same laws as Moses and Rabbi Akiva did. Consider me archaic or simply old-fashioned. But I am not forced to live with the contradictions of ever-changing, everlasting moral principles. I know that my children and all the future generations of my culture will value the same things that I value today.